The maniac who got the nickname the Woodcutter kept the whole of Louisiana in fear. At the beginning of the 20th century, his crimes were strange and illogical, and his identity still remains a mystery to everyone. People turned on music so that a maniac would not enter their homes. Why? I will tell in this video this story of one of the most brutal murderers in America, a series of the most brutal murders, the absence of an obvious motive, and the cravings of jazz music. The Woodcutter is rightfully considered one of the most dangerous and mysterious serial killers in the world today. This is a terrible page in the history of Louisiana left in the past, but even decades later, residents of the state are wondering who this cruel maniac really was and how he managed to remain not caught. The story of Monica, a woodcutter, originates on May 22, 1918. It was on that day that the Lozinski Ripper, as some media representatives call him, committed his first proven murder of the woodcutter's victim, a married couple, the world of us fallen in. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, the killer entered the bedroom of Joseph and Catherine Major and inflicted numerous blows with an axe on his spouse. The police arrived at the scene and found disfigured bodies. This brutal murder stirred up the whole of Louisiana. News about the appearance of a maniac instantly appeared in the press, and the residents of the state were hiding in a terrible expectation of new crimes. Soon the criminal made himself felt again. On June 6 of the same year, another resident of New Orleans, Louis Bez, died, and his beloved Harriet Lowe lived near Monjou's house, and as well as...
Hey, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You have to subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss new videos.
The previous victims were immigrants from Europe. This connection between the deceased led the U.S. police to believe that the killer could be a representative of the mafia that controlled this area of the city, and therefore bloody showdowns and violent crimes were not uncommon there, a false trail that detectives took led to the real chaos that reigned in New Orleans. People in a panic accused each other of involvement in the murders and stocked up on weapons. The police detained hundreds of residents of the state, and the real criminal continued his bloody mission after the previous murders. He calmed down and already on October 27, 1919, he had 11 victims on his account, including a pregnant woman who almost posthumously gave birth to a healthy child in the hospital immediately after the attack, as well as a 2-year-old. The girl as a murder weapon. The woodcutter chose an axe. It is to this fact that he owes his nickname. It is noteworthy that the killer almost always used axes which he found in the homes of his victims and later took them with him, depriving the investigation of the slightest chance of solving the case except moreover, the woodcutter changed clothes immediately after the murder at one of the crime scenes. One of the relatives of the victims noticed that several items of clothing were missing in the closet. The detectives concluded that the maniac borrows a thing from his victims so as not to attract too much attention to himself, despite the fact that there were more and more new facts in the case, as well as witnesses who survived the maniac's attack, and so you could not even make an approximate sketch of the killer. According to one of the policemen, the surviving victims were as if hypnotized and described completely different people, and some of them even mistakenly pointed to their acquaintances, in particular a woman named Erosion who was attacked by a woodcutter in March 1919, regained consciousness and said that she was attacked by her neighbor Leonardo, his son Frank, despite the fact that Rosie's husband he claimed that his wife was wrong. Leonardo and Frank were arrested and soon sentenced to death. But after a while Mrs. Corker withdrew her testimony, saying that she was wrong. However, Coyne himself apparently craved fame and recognition and once wrote a frank letter to one of the newspapers. Louisiana, dear mortal of New Orleans, they couldn't catch me, they'll never be able to do it, because I can't see, I'm not a man, I'm a demon spirit who came from hell to take your lives. The one whom you stupid townsfolk call a woodcutter. The investigation that the police conducted only amused me, but I do not advise them to continue it, otherwise they will incur my anger. I can be much worse than you think of me, the letter said, the first part of the frightening message produced. The effect of the exploded bomb, however, what the woodcutter wrote in the second part of the letter shocked the residents of Louisiana much more. Exactly at 0:15 next Tuesday, I'm going to drive through New Orleans. I want to be merciful, and therefore I offer you a choice. I love jazz very much, and I swear by all devils that I will not go into those houses from the windows of which jazz music will sound. Your woodcutter. The fear that enveloped the residents of New Orleans forced them to agree to the conditions of Monica, and on the night of 19 March, the city turned into a music festival. Literally from every window came the melodies of jazz that the woodcutter wanted to hear so much, and the bravest even went out into the streets and played jazz compositions at the venues of the city. It is worth saying that that night the killers kept their word and did not. He committed not a single crime, enjoying the power he had over ordinary people. But the craving for jazz is not the only feature of the maniac. Detectives who investigated this case were extremely surprised by some illogicality of his crime. All the victims were of different genders, ages, physique. They lived in different areas and belonged to different social classes, which refuted the initial version of the police that the local mafia was involved in the murders. The woodcutter killed men, women, and children without hesitation, while sometimes leaving living witnesses in the house who could describe him. The killer also. He chose a very chaotic way to get into the house. Sometimes he drove through small holes, and sometimes he simply tore the door off its hinges, which could attract neighbors and unnecessary witnesses. Nevertheless, soon residents of Louisiana were able to breathe freely. A series of brutal murders. It ended as suddenly as it began. At the end of 1919, the woodcutter seemed to have disappeared without committing any more crimes, but the police were not ready to give up and continued to search for the criminal. One of the suspects was Joseph Morph, a man who was allegedly shot in 1920. Come on. This theory was put forward by one of the victims at the hands of a maniac, and the writer Colin was a son, gained incredible popularity but did not receive real confirmation and was soon forgotten. Also among the suspects was the composer John Joseph Brott, who immediately after the publication of the manifesto, he released a jazz-style composition called Jazz of the Mysterious Woodcutter. Although this version also proved to be untenable, despite the fact that at first the police seriously suspected the musician, and for some time the detectives desperately tried to find at least one clue that would help them. To solve these terrible crimes, but soon the investigation was officially completed as it did not move from the dead point. However, residents of New Orleans to this day continue to put forward theories about the identity of the woodcutter and also wonder how this mysterious killer. It was possible to circumvent the whole state and not be caught. Later, analyzing the letters of the woodcutter, people came to the conclusion that the words of the maniac written in his message turned out to be prophetic, and he really was more cunning and smarter than those who chased him every time, leaving behind a bloody the trail and many questions to which there were no answers. To popular culture, the image of a maniac also left its mark. His story formed the basis of several books and film projects, including the works of writer Julie Smith, The Jazz of the Woodcutter, Chuck Palahniuk's book Ghosts, as well as the TV series American Horror Story, in which the woodcutter is one of the characters of Season 3.